Hello, welcome to Summoning Saturdays. It is technically already Sunday, but I am feeling pretty good about being so close to Saturday that it's almost Saturday. And also, I'm feeling pretty good about making it here since last time I actually missed our encounter. So, sorry. This is Linc, and this is Summoning Saturday Sunday. And today I want to talk about whether or not we're living in a simulation. I'm sure you've heard about this theory slash reality perspective slash reality experience. And it's a really important way to consider how reality could be because the way that the brain already is for humanity, you basically get sensory input from all of reality around you, and the hardware and software inside of your brain takes that sensory input and assembles it into an experience that you experience internally, and you interpret that experience to be like the experience of being in the world around you, but it's still separated by the sensory array, the sensory input, the sensory interpretation. If there's anything in between that's a little bit off, then your experience of reality is different than the actual reality around you. So that as a baseline is how humanity is supposed to be experiencing physical reality on its own. So on its own, you're already living in a simulation. Your brain, they are doing the job of simulating reality for you. And often the brain does some favors for you, such as if you're in danger, then it makes things a bit scarier. For you so that you get to safety quicker because you feel like you're in danger. By the way, if you're wondering what the noise is off to the side, I have cats and they just like to do whatever the heck it is that they're doing. Are you done? See? So, human sensory input already gives you basically a simulation experience. Now, there are a lot of questions as to whether or not we're kind of in a computer like simulation that is being controlled by someone else, and that's why we experience certain reality events such as deja vu, certain coincidences that just seem too far, certain really weird reality events like the Marana virus. um I don't I it's hard to remember. It's hard to remember what it is I'm supposed to censor on YouTube because of its weird algorithm things. Anyway, so because we've experienced a very strange reality, many people start to wonder, is this even reality or is this something else? So let's talk about how that could be happening without there being a computer simulation involved. The reason I'm saying let's talk about how that could be without the computer simulation is because I believe that humanity already experiences a lot of baseline confusion about these types of issues without there being a level of mechanization in place that I simply don't think is possible. If you wonder why it is that I don't think that a matrix-like simulation is possible in which we're living in a mechanized simulation underneath this sort of hallucinated reality, is that resource constraint. If you start looking into why it is that we don't have certain types of renewable energy right now, certain types of computing, why Bitcoin didn't take off, it's because processing is a real limit right now, and that's because there's a big limit on stuff like lithium on this planet. There's a big limit to natural resources on this planet, and that's most of the reason for why you have global conflict right now. Everybody wants the same resources, and everyone's going to try to figure out how they get to be priority in line with them, and sometimes they do it with violence. So you've got all of this resource constraint like on the planet that you're on, and this shapes what kind of technology is available. So if everyone is living in a computer simulation that's completely immersive, you're like a brain in a jar or whatever, that requires so much technology to keep sustainable, to keep going, that it's really not, it's really not, you know, look up the physics of like maintaining a Dyson sphere and you'll see how the resource constraints of huge technology endeavors are just impossible. You simply can't keep bringing it all in. You have to have another society on the outside doing all of the mining and maintenancing and basically keeping up things in a way that is simply just doesn't happen. So I know that's like a big argument against the technical possibilities of such, but I think it's enough. I think it really should be weighed. How does computing actually work? How do resources actually work? How does engineering and building actually work? Um, because whatever it is that you experience on the inside of a simulation is going to be shaped like the people on the outside of the simulation. Whatever it is that we would be experiencing in here, if this were a simulation, it would be extremely demonstrative of what outside the simulation, those building it, think reality is like. In which case, I don't know. It just seems like a lot of trouble to build something like this whenever it's not very fantastical. I mean, we build video games all the time and they look like Final Fantasy. This over here around us, that we're experiencing right now, it's not very, I'm not going to say it's not very special, but default reality is not very overwhelming. It's pretty normal. So when you experience abnormal things, does that mean that suddenly you're in a computer simulation, or does it mean something else? For one, it depends on which abnormal thing you're experiencing. Sometimes you experience hallucinations, and that's basically um, kind of a shift in your own perceptions. That is basically the simulation that your senses are running for you so that you can perceive the entire rest of the world. Um, Whenever you hallucinate, you're basically having a difference in opinion between your sensory input and external reality. And sometimes this can be up to how your brain is interpreting the sensory input. Sometimes it can be up to how your senses themselves are getting it wrong. In fact, looking at stage magic is a very good way to start understanding the simulation on YouTube and doing a search for Penn and Teller's Fool Us. A bunch of different stage magicians on YouTube who have been on the show, they are allowed to post clips of their own performances on the show on their own YouTube channel. So there's like a whole bunch of clips of the show on YouTube of different stage magic performances. And since all of them are being watched and judged by Penn and Teller themselves, they actually give an analysis of how well the trick was performed, what tricks were actually being performed in the illusion, and whether or not they're even able to guess that. And it of just how it is that the senses can be fooled, like how much the senses can be fooled, even whenever there's cameras involved, whenever there's like live television at play, or even like there's a live stage show that they do it on, and it's being uh, recorded for a TV show. So there's a lot of performance aspect there, and it's all very impressive, but it's all also illusions. Anything that you see that's performed on that show, is being falsified in some way. It's a projection. It's uh, its own little matrix. At times, they even make jokes about um, living in a simulation, or experiencing two levels of reality at once, experiencing multiple realities, because you kind of have to keep, as a magician, the trick in your head. You have to keep the reality of what it is to be in the audience and the reality of how the trick is actually working in your head at the same time. You have to keep those two different perspectives. And um, I think understanding that you can do that in your own head, you can actually switch perspective, can help you start to understand how we can be living in a simulation, but we're in control of the simulation. And gaining control of your own simulation is most of the point of magic. Either illusory magic for stage, or uh, more spiritual magic for magicians, mages, wizards. It's hard to say the spiritual, the the occult magic, because so much of it actually merges together. You can use stage magic tricks to do things, both magical, psychological, ritual. In fact, there's quite a lot of ritual magic that uses the exact same psychology as stage magic tricks, and it's very interesting to gain an understanding of that. To start gaining an understanding that even the rituals that you experience on some level, those are stage plays. They are stage plays that we are putting on for ourselves so that we can gain an understanding, so that we can let's see, do I need the mic to be louder? It's a little hard to tell, but I can tell it's picking up. Sorry, I got a little distracted by the user interface. So and that's kind of how I can tell that I'm not living in a simulation, because if I was simulating this reality, it would be so easy to focus on this stuff and I would not have any problems whatsoever. Now, here's where I think things get complicated. It's very easy to have the theory that you're living in a simulation if you're the only person, because then everything around you and everyone around you, they're all part of the simulation. And you don't really have to think about, well, do the NPCs have agency? Do they have free will? Do they think? In the Matrix movie, we've got all the different programs. We've got the Agent Smiths, but then we find out that the programs themselves actually have real lives. They have children. They have families. They have their own existence. They're the machines side of reality and life. And so even in the Matrix, even in the simulation, it's not just a simulation. It's actually a real world that has real people in it and real life implications. So even if we were in a simulation, the simulation itself has to not just reflect reality, but the simulation itself is a part of reality. Everything that happens inside a computer isn't some sort of vapor ether magic that doesn't exist. That's real physics. It's real energy. It's real chemical and physical interactions, and everything that happens inside of our heads, there's a biological component that exists there, and that is physical. All of the energy, that's physical. All thought, it's got a physical component. You can't think without moving electricity around in your brain, without moving chemicals, without doing all sorts of actual actions inside of your brain. And all of that is physical. That's all part of real reality. So even with a simulation, even while experiencing a simulation, you're still experiencing reality. And just to be able to experience reality in any way, to experience change, you have to be getting some kind of input. That input has to come from somewhere. Someone has to cause it. It all has to go down a chain and become understandable by someone. I think actually watching The Matrix as almost a disprover of the simulation of reality would be a good mental exercise, because one of the overarching themes of The Matrix that I found very interesting is the hugeness of the machinery, the colossal machines, the just labyrinthine architecture that is involved in keeping up the machines that support humanity and are technically powered by the electricity that humanity generates. Is of machinery. Again, from resources from who knows where. I don't know if the machine race themselves, like the robots, do they set up mining so that they can build this? Like, how are they keeping that up? Because they're going to have to build their own society where they mine Earth for resources to build machinery to keep up humanity. So there's going to be a whole other layer on that where machines are doing that now. And again, I don't know how possible it is to really have that many layers of physical reality resource wise. I think that the real problem is that you don't have just one human experiencing the simulation of reality. You've got at least billions. On this planet Earth right now, in the present moment, we've got billions of humans all living together. And then we've also got trillions of animals and one-celled organisms and microscopic organisms that are also technically part of animal life as well. But just counting all of the animals around, all of the insects, there's just so many. And all of them are also having an experience of reality. So once you understand just how many living organisms on this planet have to experience reality, that's where it starts to break down that all of them are experiencing a simulated experience. But all of them are experiencing a simulated experience in which their senses give them input of the world around them and then interpret to them, or rather, and then send to their brain, which interprets those senses. And the interpretation of those senses tells the self in that organism, hey, this is what reality is. This is what I'm experiencing. And then they respond to that simulation that their senses give of reality. Now, everybody on Earth is all having a simulated sensory experience of reality. And you can observe with many creatures at many times when two different creatures are having a different experience of reality and they're not agreeing with what the experience is. You often have this whenever just one animal scares another animal. Didn't mean to. I live with 3 cats and they're startling each other all of the time. There's all kinds of a bag rattles and one of them jumps because they think it's like some kind of danger or something. That's their senses giving them the wrong impression of the environment. And like sometimes they get into fights. When it comes to humans get into fights quite a lot over basically different impressions of the same environment. And that's because all of our senses are attuned differently. All of our bodies are different. All of our selves are different. Sometimes there's actual motivation to claim that there's a different experience of reality than one actually experiences, to lie for one's advantage. So when it comes to are we living in a simulation, some of the question is, do we necessarily live in a simulation because we live with each other? We all have to agree on a reality together, but we don't agree on reality. We all have to agree on a reality together, but we don't agree on reality together. There is no one agreed upon reality that everyone lives in all at once. I believe that we all live in the same physical world all together, although I think that how time works and what time means figured into that is pretty ambiguous. But because we're all so many of us together all once, all of our sensory experiences are not going to agree with each other. Sometimes the only way to explain that seems to be something like a computer simulation. But usually the reason why our experiences don't agree with each other is because we have such different senses and we're all attuned very differently. There's really not there's not a lot of ways that humanity could train together to all align and attune our senses to be like in sync with each other right now. That's not a big concern in the world. They've got other problems they want to solve first. So until we all start getting in sync with each other through daily meditation where the entire world like synchronizes together. I just don't really see us all having the same experience of reality anyway. And I think that starting to come to terms with the fact that we don't all experience the same reality as each other, and then trying to figure out, well, then how do we go forward from there? For one, I wouldn't suggest trying to all experience the same reality. You're never going to have everybody who wants to buy into that. There's always going to be somebody who wants to be deceptive, for one. And for two, there's just going to be people who disagree or who are confused, and they're just not going to buy in for a entire consensus reality. However, it is good to keep in mind what other people think is going on in reality. It is good to keep in mind what it is that they've got in mind, because then whenever you start communicating to them about the reality that you're experiencing, you kind of know to prepare them for anything that is going to be different than what they expect. Because usually it's not that people won't listen to what they don't expect, it's that if they're not prepared for it, then their danger senses come up and they get defensive automatically. Once they get defensive, it's very hard to I don't want to say change their minds, but to get them to look at things from a different point of view than the one they've got right then. Because as soon as the danger instincts kick in, as soon as fear is involved, as soon as defensiveness is involved, then it's very hard for someone to move. Um, you typically don't move while defending. You're shielding up. You're busy. And once someone is engaged in defensive mode, they start engaging parts of their brain that come to conclusions faster than humans can actually think. This is why you'll see somebody coming up with just sometimes the most ludicrous defenses for their actions because they're being pressed in the moment. And so if somebody feels that they have to quickly come up with an excuse for something, they will come up with an excuse for something, whether it makes any real sense or not. This is why high pressure interrogation type of techniques don't always hold up in court and are not always reliable for getting information, because if somebody is feeling like they're in danger, their brain is capable of coming up with anything. And if their brain is capable of coming up with anything, that means that whatever it is that they're telling you is not necessarily true. So, if someone is having a very panicked or a sorry, my connection went out a little bit. If somebody is having a very panicked or alarmed state of reality, if they're experiencing reality in that heightened state, then they're not going to be getting a proper sensory impression of reality. Their senses are going to be rewriting themselves to basically enable that person to defend themselves. So you start seeing in bullet time and you stop having debate tactics in your brain anymore. People start trying to figure out how to best protect themselves primarily. And in that state, you will not make proper logical conclusions. Your brain will try to speed up logic so that you can do other things. Pressing the fast forward button on thought does not often result in very logical conclusions. It will result in some very creative conclusions. And it's a fun way to brainstorm sometimes. But you've got to slow down at some point and kind of look over your cards and count them up and see if you've actually got a hand. At some point, you know, you have to look at the hand of cards that reality has dealt you and count it all up, no matter what. Um, there's going to be a time where you just you have to decide, what is it that you've been given here? And what is it that you're going to make out of it? And is anybody around you going to agree with you on what it is that you've made out of it? Because the people around you, they're just like you, and they can change their minds at any time. They can notice things, they can ignore things, they can be convinced, they can be hard-headed. And so focusing too much on the fact that you're in a simulation really ignores the people around you, and that can be very dangerous. Anytime that you basically are writing off a whole swath of humanity to kind of fit into a theory, you've got to be very careful. At some point, you need to write that swath back in of humanity back into your world because they do exist in reality and they are very important. So the simulation of reality types of theories, sometimes they get a bit concerning because they don't really incorporate all of reality, or they have an explainer as to how, like, oh, the reality where you think that there's billions of people is wrong and there's actually only millions of people. It's like you it's a little weird that you needed to write out billions of people for your theory to work. Usually when people do that, it's a sign that they're theorizing in the wrong direction. So getting to the point where people live in a consensus reality and it gets kind of wobbly around the edges. You've got a lot of magic users living on the same planet together, and they can all do magic, and they can all do amazing things. So one thing that you can do if you're a magician is summon something into reality. When you summon something into reality, it all of a sudden exists, and it's always existed and it always will exist. And there's never been a time when it didn't exist, but you can remember a time when it didn't exist, but you can no longer find a time when it didn't exist. It gets weird. As soon as you summon something into reality, it has a reality. It's in reality, and because it's in reality now, it has to have always been in reality. There's a means to which it got to wherever it is that it is, and there is a means by which it will eventually expire. It will, turn into other types of atoms, or it will break down into atoms, and those atoms will turn into other types of molecules at some point. It'll be put together in entirely different composition, but it's always existed in our reality. It just, changed configuration to get into what it is that was before you right now. And before it is that you summoned it there, it never existed in the first place. And you just have to accept that. That's how magic is. Now, the thing is, once you summon something into reality, it goes ahead and it creates itself. It's been a part of reality all this time. It also means that everyone else who's, in reality they also get a chance to get a piece of it. They get a chance to interact with it. They get a chance to have had a history with it. And so whenever you bring something into reality, you are bringing it into a consensus reality. You're not just bringing it into a sandbox that only you play with. You're bringing it into a very big, very social game, a multiplayer game, as it were. And so everyone else around you is also able to bring stuff into reality, to do magic, to alter the fabric, as it were. And everyone's able to do that all the time, and is doing it all the time, and will keep doing it all the time. So you could consider reality to be highly in flux in some ways. But on some level, we seem to all kind of hold it together because the rules of physical reality are pretty nailed down, and good job on that. So that's the thing, is that if we're living in a state that the places where it's hard to understand how reality overlaps are the places where we seem to disagree with each other, where we seem to not share the same world together, where we seem to not share the same views and opinions. And usually this comes down to differences in religion, not differences in opinion, but differences in religion. Because people don't usually understand how we can all believe in different things, yet be experiencing the same thing. Why, if we're all experiencing the same reality, do we come away with such completely different interpretations of why it's happening and what's going on behind it all? And that's a very good question. I think that instead of trying to find a place in which we all agree on the exact same reality, though, I think instead just understanding that it's a reality made up of so many different individuals that it's just going to have many identities to it, many facets to it. And there's just going to be some angles that we don't understand and can't see from where it is that we are. It's not about having to see every angle and having to understand every angle. Sometimes it's just about acknowledging that those other angles exist and that people actually are seeing from them, and that is the experience that they're having. Sometimes it's just about acknowledging the existence of others and that they're having an existence that's different than yours. That is a great starting point. Sometimes it's the starting point, and it's usually the place that you're going to begin with most encounters that you make with people, is just understanding that they're a person and they got here via a different road than you got here. That road taught them different things, and it means that they see from a slightly different perspective than you do. The thing is, the simulation of reality that you experience, you can actually share with someone else if you work together with them. This is, in fact, what a religion usually is many people conferring together to have the same communal experience of reality for however long a time that they are together worshiping in that religion. Some people make it abundantly implicit that they have a religious experience for whatever time that they do their religious stuff, and then whenever they're not doing religious stuff, they have different experiences. So you can purposefully have these shared experiences with other people. You can also, for instance, just go to a live performance of something, or watch a movie and experience the same thing that other people are experiencing. And you're going to have a different experience that everyone else is experiencing, but you're going to be all experiencing that same input. I think this is why fandoms are so popular right now, is because there are a lot of people who are bonding over the fact that they all experience the same thing, and they're all comparing each other's experiences and sharing joy in the way that they have the same experiences, but they also have different experiences. And it, it's really amazing that um, that people can have all of these different experiences together, but still be able to coordinate in these ways, but still be able to agree. If we were truly experiencing a simulation, I think a lot of people would have much more disagreement over what's going on in reality, and much more than we're experiencing right now. I guess the way that I could put it is, Felix was really into UFOs whenever he was a kid. And one of the things that he found weird is that actually many people saw the same types of UFOs all the time. You would expect to see just all kinds of different UFOs and all kinds of different aliens, all kinds of different experiences from all kinds of different people if it was all imaginary. But experiences from all kinds of different people if it was all imaginary. But actually, they were, I'm not going to say all the same, these different sort of families of encounters. And a lot of people kind of had the same idea of what aliens should look like. A lot more people than you would expect, considering this is like, 40s and 50s is when we start uh, I think, collecting a lot of these experiences. Before then, whenever people describe UFO type of experiences, they're often like they'll talk about it being fairies or something like that, and so it's kind of hard to group that in with the same encounter description. But it's interesting that people's experiences agree with each other so much in what you would think would be a highly imaginative field where there would be a lot of difference of opinion with each other. Instead, they actually have a uh, pretty impressive um, group experience, pretty impressive shared simulation, as it were. And I think this really speaks to how on some subconscious level humanity is trying to share the same experience with each other. On some level we really want to all be experiencing the same thing. We 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 want to all be sharing one moment together with each other. And I think that a lot of arguments, a lot of disagreements are about differences in opinion as to what that one shared experience should be. But I think that remembering that we're all still going to have a different experience from each other, we're all still different people having different experiences, would be a good place to start. Acknowledging we're all different, and that's fine. And in fact, it's how it is. It's expected. It's what we're going to get. Acknowledging that we're starting from that point, from all these different experiences, and coming together to create something different than that is a good place to start. Pretty much all disagree with each other. You can't have a different experience of reality without disagreeing with the reality that you're different from. Having a different reality necessitates having a boundary between this reality and that boundary is going to be a disagreement between realities. Sometimes you've got to find a reality that you both have in common to be in temporarily just to get somewhere and then recede back into your own realities where you stay predominantly. Maybe that's got to happen. But acknowledging that we're all experiencing different realities, that we can all also experience the same reality, because on some level we're all living in the same place. This is all the same physical reality. Everybody is here in, you know, maybe just pausing and acknowledging that everybody's here. Isn't that amazing? There are billions of people on this planet and they're all here. That's a way bigger deal than I think people really acknowledge. I don't like explaining away billions of people's experiences as just a simulation. I don't like saying that I'm experiencing a simulation and there's billions of people on this planet and they may just be ones and zeros to fill out the world that I'm experiencing, falsely. I think that there's something cheapening about that experience because I think that it's very, very clear whenever you experience other people around you that they are real. You may not agree with them, but they are very real. In fact, disagreeing with someone is a very good way of them behaving realistically. Um, I guess sometimes people want an experience of reality, and when they don't get that experience of reality, they experience a dismay. And sometimes they want to reject that reality that they're inside of because they were looking for a different one. And maybe they think they're in the wrong reality and that they just need to reject it until they get into the new one. But you really can't treat reality like that. It it won't change if you disagree with it. Your perceptions can change, but the reality that you're experiencing, the actual baseline thing that is generating all of these sensory experiences, it will stay the same. It is reality. That is the reality of the situation. And it's just not healthy to try to define a reality that you know can't be part of the reality you're living in. I think this is where magic becomes very difficult for some people, because then the question is, well, if I'm doing magic, aren't I defining a reality different than the one I'm living in? I think that magic is about acknowledging the rest of the reality that you have not actually found yet. Magic is about discovering something new, finding room to discover something new, finding room for change. And so, like I said before, whenever you summon something, it's like it was there the whole time. Well, what if you never summoned something and it was actually there the whole time? And the magic was there for you to be able to discover that it's been there waiting for you this entire time. That to me is pretty dang magical. Reality is infinite. It is full of possibilities. It is full of all kinds of different physical matter, and it is full of experiences waiting for you. So the best thing to do is to start looking for the parts of reality that you want to experience and just enjoy them. There are going to be a lot of disagreements between people over what reality is and what reality isn't, but you may find that all of those disagreements and that the arguments themselves are actually pretty circular. So sometimes it may be worth it just to consider, how is my time in reality best invested? What is the best thing for me to be doing in this reality? And if there is a new reality that I want to be experiencing, can I achieve that reality? Can I start experiencing that angle of reality? How can I get there? Is it by doing something different in my own reality? And what can I do in my own reality to gain this new experience of the reality that I want to have? Once you answer that question, you have done magic. What can I do in this reality to gain the new reality that I want to have? What it is that you do, that is what it is that it takes to do magic. That is a spell. That's as simple as it gets, really. I think that striving towards simplification can be a good goal when it comes to these questions about, are we living in a simulation? If you have to make the equation much, much more complex to be able to get to the conclusion, then it may be that it's too complex and the conclusion itself is actually much simpler. Reality itself is complex and simple at the same time. It is very easy to get lost in its complexity. It's very easy to forget its simplicity. The point of reality and the different experiences of it, that reality will always be there for you, no matter what experience you're having of it. And if you want to change that experience, you can always do it. If you need to have your own experience of reality for a while, your own unique experience where you experience it alone, you can do that. And you can come back into a reality where you experience it together with other people, because reality can be experienced in so many different ways, from so many different angles, from so many different vantage points. We don't have to experience it all together. We can go on to our own special interest groups. We can come back and say what it is that we found out. All we have to do is listen to each other about what our own experiences are and acknowledge that we're all going to have different experiences. Call it division of labor. You don't have to experience every reality ever, every facet of it, every angle of it. Other people are doing that. That's why it's so interesting to talk to them and to share reality with them. It's because you can find out what it is that they've been doing. You can find out about all the realities that you haven't been experiencing and maybe can't experience yourself. There are so many different parts of reality, so many different facets of it. And maybe the reason there's billions of people on this planet is because that's how many people it takes to be able to even begin to understand all of the depth, all of the angles, all of the different viewpoints that reality has in store for us and will continue to have.